What I would like to do is start, first let me welcome you all from the Farm Bureau from Addison County. I'm Vice President of Addison County Farm Bureau, and we host these. And we are so delighted that everybody attends these, as many people as we can get. And what we'd like to do is start with the legislators introducing yourselves and tell us what you're working on, okay? Terry, do you think it should be up a little higher for you?
Not your level, Cheryl, but not always. I'm Terry Norris. I represent Benson, Orwell, Shoreham, and Whiting. And I'm on the Ag and Forestry Committee. And on Friday, we got this letter from the EPA. I'd like to just read a little bit of it. I think I have 3 minutes, right?
Can you move closer to the mic? We get better.
Pretty much. I sound loud up here. This is from the EPA to the Agency of Natural Resources and the Department of Ag and Forestry, or Department of Agriculture, Food and Markets. It said, Dear Secretary Moore and Secretary Tibbetts, thank you for submitting the 2018 Accountability Report on March 7th, 2018, and for your extensive efforts to implement the Lake Champlain TMDLs. First and foremost, EPA is pleased with the overall magnitude and quality of Vermont's accomplishments since the passage of Act 64 in 2015. Your staff has clearly been working hard to get new programs off the ground, rapidly award large amounts of new funding to priority phosphorus reduction projects, ramp up inspection programs, and establish the new comprehensive tracking and accounting system. The many milestones that have been completed reflect this excellent progress. This is their report card. There's about, I think, maybe 28 different criteria, and Vermont passed all but one. And that one is issue final developed lands general permit is incomplete so far. But that doesn't need to be done until 2019. So I think we should be super, super proud of all the farmers in this state.
Yes, I sit on the House Agriculture and Forestry Committee right beside Terry. And we've been spending a lot of time on water quality related issues, but also some, because we're in the forestry, we're working on a forestry economic development bill that's out there. It's all part of our working landscape, so they rolled the two committees together, or put agriculture and forestry in the same committee, I should say. And I did receive an email from Senator Bray yesterday, and he sends his regrets for not being here, but he went to his daughter's wedding out of state, and he's traveling on his way back.
I want to introduce you too. So you can come up back.
Good afternoon, my name is Clare Eyre. I live in Addison next door. I'm serving my 16th year in the Senate, and I chair Senate Health and Welfare. Most of what I do is about healthcare, mental health care, drug addiction, workforce issues, insurance, that sort of stuff, and all of the things that fall within the agency of human services except for corrections.
Good afternoon, I'm Diane Lanfer, representative. I live in Vergennes, and I represent Addison 3, which is Ferrisburg, Vergennes, Panton, Waltham, and Addison. Grandma. This is my grandson, Sam, who's with me. We got it. He is 18 months yesterday. And so I serve on a House Appropriations Committee, and this is my 10th year in the legislature. Yeah.
So I'd like to introduce Jackie. If you want to just come up for a minute and just tell everybody what you do for us. She's our Farm Bureau legislative liaison. So.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. I represent all of you, but I live in Cabot. If you're Vermont Farm Bureau members, hopefully you've been getting the Under the Golden Dome, which goes out on Fridays and now on Mondays, because Joe wanted to make sure you all knew what was happening at the State House so that you could come up if you wanted to. And this week there's a whole lot of great stuff. Am I getting beeped? Wow. I'm going to keep talking. There's a whole lot of wonderful things going on for agriculture in general and dairy in particular this coming week. Tomorrow is the celebration. I'm not sure if it's the 20th or the 25th. Do you know, Marie? Is it the 25th for the 2+2 program? Been going on for a long time. So the kids who have graduated and those who have been chosen for the next year's program will be there. And we're also going to be celebrating the life of a good friend of the dairy community, Bob Parsons. He's an extension agent who died recently, and it's a huge loss to us. This week there are going to be a couple different things on water. There is going to be a movie called The Lake Effect on Thursday, hosted by the Lieutenant Governor. There's also going to be a meeting hosted by the House Agriculture Committee they will also be joined by the Senate Ag Committee, and we are going to hear a presentation by Dr. Heather Darby, who does a lot of research on land use, soil use, and water quality. She's a big proponent and a real positive force on behalf of our industry. She will be there, as well as other farmers from Lake Carmi, the Lake Carmi watershed, to talk about what's going on over at the lake. As you might know, if you've been reading what I've been writing, there's a lot of focus on that area. And we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with a couple of those bills that are working their way through House Natural Resources. On April 18th, the House Agriculture Committee is going to be writing a resolution on behalf of Earth Day, promoting everything wonderful about agriculture and forestry. And we're going to be hosting a press conference at 10 o'clock in the Cedar Creek Room. President Joe Tisbert from Vermont Farm Bureau is going to be talking, and several others, so we hope you can all be there and help us celebrate our industries as we go forward with Earth Day. If you ever come to the State House or have a question on anything that goes on, if you can't get a hold of any of your representatives, and I actually have worked with all of them, believe it or not. Claire, before you were in House, where were you before you were in welfare? The Finance. Finance, that's right. So she was the money lady, we went there too. But we tend to work with just about every committee, and so it's very important that you tell me what's going on your farm, how I can help you if you have a question. But if you get there, I'd love to have you visit your legislators and come into committee. So please come to the State House. They're going to be there for at least another 6 months. So 6 months? No. I would be done by then. 6 weeks. So come on over and say hi. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. I'd like to open it up for questions now. And just a reminder, if you're going to ask a question and make comments, you have 2 minutes. And you can address it to a particular legislator or all of them. So anybody have a question?
He wants to talk.
Sorry, I had my mouth full of food, but anyway, I was asked by Harold Geyer, who couldn't make it here because of work schedule, to address this. He has been working on, he was working on this for quite a while when he was in the Senate. Loading and stock charges for milk. 64 when the bulk tanks went in, which I think was a beginning of the end for the farmers. Somebody, I guess the legislature decided that milk belongs to the buyer, not the farmer, once it goes on the truck. And he sees all these fancy looking rigs going past his place, Kenworth tractors and shiny trailers all looking brand new. And he said, he thinks the haulers are making better money than the farmers. Of course, most everybody is. Farmers aren't making anything at this point, I'm afraid. which needs to be aided. But anyway, he thinks that this is a good time to address this, and is hoping that the legislature will do something about it. I might ask Harvey to address this. He's a longtime farmer of the bunch, I guess.
I do remember Harold talking about that on a pretty regular basis, and we're somewhat limited to what we can do on milk pricing and milk handling in the legislature. What you're talking about is kind of a private contract between the cooperatives or the milk handler and the farmers themselves. And so I guess we could take some legislative action, but I'm not sure if it would really be that beneficial. We did have the Milk Commission met again this year for the first time in quite a number of years. It looked like at a whole host of issues around the dairy industry and what we could do. Most of the recommendations that they came up with would be, and they have been sent down to Washington to be discussed in the new farm bill that's being discussed now, that's there. As far as setting prices for milk in Vermont, we've discussed that over the years. I remember it was about 10 years ago or so, we had a program where the legislature backed, I think it was around 10 or $11 million that they made some payments to the dairy farmers directly to help stabilize the milk prices. Unfortunately, we don't have any way to recoup those dollars in the state because most of the milk that we produce is consumed and was shipped and consumed out of state. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, they've run similar programs to that, but they have the marketplace and they're working off the back of Vermont producers. And yet, back years ago when we had the Dairy Compact, we had a little more control over the prices. That was something that was sanctioned by the U.S. Congress, and when its time ran out, we couldn't get it reintroduced, so we're kind of struggling with that. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I kind of went all around the barn here, but I don't know if I answered your question directly.
You did what you could.
Mark Bowman, Addison, Vermont. Before I address this current issue, I want to point out, we mentioned the TMDLs before. And the TMDLs were done by the EPA and they had no scientific basis for it. It was all arbitrary and capricious. So I encourage the legislature and anybody involved with agriculture is we got to come up with a sound science to prove or disprove all these regulations that are being written based on somebody's soundbite understanding of farming. Now, as far as the payment goes, it used to be farmers had a right to get paid and they had a lien on agricultural products until they were paid under common law. The UCC was adopted in the 50s and it has been amended since. And farmers basically have no lien on their product. They have no right to get paid, but people that they buy from can have a lien on them. And what happened was, a few years back, it was just during the Obama administration, the UCC was amended and it said that all agricultural liens are subservient to other liens that are on the property, on the thing, unless the statute that created the agricultural lien also specified that it had a higher priority than, say, a bank lien. So farmers, when they sell, they have no protection at all, and that's something that the state should be looking at. One state that has good protection is California. We should be looking at the rules California has for agricultural liens and try to adopt the relevant portions. Thank you.
Wow. I can speak about the water quality projects going on in the state and what's been going on, and you are right in the fact that there's science and background to use to develop the programs that we're currently following. And we had them before, they've been adjusted, but basically if you do a certain practice on the farm, like no-till. No-till is a process where you can plant your crops into existing crop without having to till the ground. And it's there, that has some formulation with it that says if you do this and keep the ground covered, that you'll have less phosphorus runoff. So they keep track of the number of acres that are in these programs to kind of quantify what it is that we've accomplished. And they had a program here the 1st of March talking about agricultural practices. It was the No-Till and Cover Crop Symposium that was put on by UVM and in the industry doing that. And it's kind of interesting to look at that positive impact on water quality. And this was done with Extension's Agronomy and Conservation Assistance Program, and this is a program that goes out and actually works directly with the farms, on the farms, with their farm plan, following the nutrient management plan to reduce phosphorus and runoff from taking place on the farms. They're working in 10 major watersheds in the state. They've got 57,498 acres of improved practices on there. You got 46,235 nutrient management plans and 5,300 acres of conservation tillage, no-till planting, and 4,000 acres of cover crops. Now these numbers are not the total numbers that fall into that category or those categories. These are numbers that the UVM extension is working directly with, and so there's other groups working with some of them, because when I talked to the Agency of Agriculture about these numbers, and they are only counting the acres that they've had a contract on to have something done. And with the no-till or with the cover cropping practices, I see people out putting cover crops on after the deadline for being in compliance with either the federal or the state program. So I know there's more acres going into this program than shows up here. So that goes to part of the question about how do we quantify how we're making improvements in water quality. And the UCC, I wasn't really familiar with that. I do know that when you sell some animals through a commission sales or an auction barn or something like that, they have like 48 hours to get the check back to you. Whether there's a lien put on at the auction barns or not, I don't know, but I know and that's a UCC program as well. So I'd have to look into it to get better clarification on part of what you were asking about.
I guess I'm speaking out of turn, but Mark Bowen again. What you're referring to, Harvey, is GIPSA, Grain Inspection Packers and Stockyard Act. It does not cover other products such as milk, nor grain, or other things. If you are producing vegetables, you're covered under the Perishable Agricultural Commodity Act, but most other products that are produced in the state is not protected and does not have a priority if the person that you are selling to goes bankrupt or a bank decides to foreclose or something else.
Marie Algott, Blue Spruce Farm. So you've already heard several topics already surrounding water quality. And I always like to speak on that because I think sometimes our delegation gets disconnected from all the work that we're doing here in Addison County. You know, I wish Chris Bray was here because when I read his quotes in the paper that says, business as usual isn't gonna work and I'm gonna change things. And it's like the required agricultural practices have been a law for only a little over a year. and look at the immense changes that we're making. It isn't fair to say that nothing is happening and it's business as usual. As a matter of fact, we aren't farming the way we used to. We aren't farming the way we were 5 years ago. We aren't farming the way we were 2 years ago. Who would have said, my Blue Spruce counterparts, that 5 years ago we wouldn't be moldboard plowing? You know, we've evolved like the rest of society's evolved, and we are making a difference. And I hope that we would get our delegation to acknowledge our efforts and work with us and help us lead the charge rather than knocking us down all the time. I do appreciate all the hard work that so many of you have done. And I think together we are going to make a difference, and we're going to be here for the future of Vermont. Because one of the things we have for us that's not usual to the rest of the country is we're going to have water in the future with climate change. So if we can become resilient, we can build our organic matter in our soil so that we can withstand these heavy downfalls of rain, we will be a very important food hub for the region. Because some of the places where we're used to getting vegetables and food right now are going to be too dry. And we're going to have to look at places that will have the natural resources to get to where we need to go.
So, hi, thank you, Marie. It's very inspiring, and I think, I can't speak for all the delegation or others, but I can say that, and Chris Bray isn't here for those particular remarks, but sometimes, and I can't speak to exactly his words, but sometimes I think we're critical of ourselves, that we can't allow business as usual in Montpelier to continue when there's so much happening and so much that needs to happen. So I would take that on ourselves, that we're the ones that can't let business as usual and not really look at this other than at the surface level, and that we need to be the partners that support that future that has to happen in Vermont. And sometimes it's good that things move slow in Montpelier, and sometimes it can be a little frustrating when you feel like you've got the right avenue and the way to support industry as a whole in Vermont and our water quality, that we're not getting there fast enough, meaning we're not getting it done.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Connor. My wife and I, Marianne, operate a small dairy in Addison, and I just wanted to bring up just a couple issues. One on the nutrient management, it has to do with the water quality. They were promoting it pretty big the last 3-4 years, and we decided we better sign up for that. There was some financial help with signing up for the program with the expense of the samples and whatnot, so we did take advantage of that. But this year when I went back, I found out there is no more help for the soil samples. Each farm has to pay for all that themselves, and it's $35 for every sample. It has to be done every 3 years, and there's quite a few samples, because it has to be done every 10 acres has to be sampled. Also, I found out that the program that they're using, called Go Crop, has a renewal cost of $500 every year, which I did not know. So it was quite a burden this year to find out that I had all that expense on top of these low milk prices, and I don't know if that was possible very well. My other question, I'm not sure who to direct it to, but I've been reading a lot about the MMP, which is the Milk Market Protection Plan. That's an insurance policy that been promoted that the farmer pays for, and supposed to help out with low milk prices. We bought into this policy a few years back. Significant cost, and prices fell, and we got $0. And now they're saying it's revamped and it's supposedly a lot better than the old one, but I don't know what's changed on it, so maybe you can address that. Thank you.
Yes, actually, I should have Cheryl address this one. The Addison County Farm Bureau is putting on a program on Saturday, April 14th, out at the VFW on Exchange Street in Middlebury. And they have Dr. John Newton. He's the director of marketing with the American Farm Bureau. And this is exactly what his topic is. He'll be able to have that discussion if you can go, and you ought to bring some of your farmer friends because this is a newly revised program. Actually, this is one of the proposals that the Dairy Commission that I spoke about earlier worked on and made recommendations to make some changes to this. Peter Welch, our representative in Washington, took that information down to Washington to see if we could get a program. So this program is actually coming out before the new farm bill will be available. So it's just in the existing program. So if you're interested in that, there's flyers here. You can pick up a flyer. But anyways, that's what the discussion is going to be all about. And you're absolutely right about the old program. People paid incredible money into the program, and most people didn't see anything back from it at all, and it didn't help us at all in some very difficult milk pricing times. So come to this.
I don't think I introduced myself before. Excuse me, I'm Joe Gleason. I live down on the shore of Lake Champlain, Leonard's Bay. I long call it the Bridport Lakeside Slums. In 2011, I lived in the lake for a while, 3 weeks of total hell. I still haven't got my yard totally cleaned up. One of the reasons we had so much water that year is the lake is filling in rapidly with soil off our farm fields. Every time you get a good rain after the corn goes in, the stream that runs through the corner of my yard looks like flowing mud, and the entire bay is brown. When in the 80s, when I wanted to put a boat in, whack a couple of 2x4s into the ground, put a plank out to it, and you had a dock. Now, in order to get to any kind of boat, you have to moor it well out in the lake, drag a canoe or a kayak across 100 feet of mud flats, and then you don't have much water. You got to pull it out or pull it or push it. This is really depreciated property values along there, and this is happening all over the lake. So corn, I don't think, is an economic thing for the farmers to grow. As one grass-fed farmer said, the farmers are so focused on milk production that they aren't looking at the actual expenses, and corn is very expensive to grow. He says, well, if you spend $1 growing corn, you're going to get about 50 cents increased production. And, you know, it's the machinery cost that's sinking most of the farmers. It's just out of sight. Whereas the grass-fed farmer, he's got next to nothing for equipment. I mean, I go back to 1944 in my farming, family farm in Connecticut. We were almost strictly grass-fed. And, you know, we didn't have erosion. So I think we gotta look to the past and to the future and sort this whole thing out.
Thank you, Marie. I was just going to call on you.
Did you have a question?
No, I wanted to see if you were going to make a comment.
Well, I'm going to beg to differ. What we're learning is exactly that. The way that we're polluting our lake is through erosion and runoff. We're focusing on improving the health of our soils. We're putting buffers. The cover crops, if you have something growing on your field 12 months a year, and it rains on that field, those soil particles are less likely to be loose and wash away. So all this new information is coming to us farmers, every kind of farmer. And we are learning how to keep our soils in place. And I know I'm on the Governor's Climate Action Commission, and someone said to me, Marie, you must know, you have soil tests, you must know how you're doing with soil health. And of course, we're so focused on phosphorus and nitrogen, I had to go look back on all these soil tests to realize, of course, these practices we're implementing, the proof is out there. We're improving our organic matter. And the other thing I want to say is, I want to really focus on S260 that I see as another layer of regulation that is too premature. We haven't even had a chance to make sure all our farms are following the required agricultural practices. We have a whole segment of farms, hundreds of farms still, that are still getting used to following these new rules. And yet there's another whole layer of regulation. And the part that really upsets me as a hard-working farmer is that there's an ability, they seem to think we need to sue each other, and Vermonters, that citizen suit really sits badly with me because there's so much regulation, and the agencies have all the regulatory authority they need to make sure I'm not polluting.
I'd just like to make a couple comments on that. One of the reasons, I mean, the Audettes, I think, have done a great job with what they're working with. I have to hand them a lot of credit. But one of the reasons that we're able to improve the humus content in the soil here is we're shipping so much feed in from the Midwest. The grasslands have been the second richest carbon sink in the world, and it is being depleted very fast because of the chemical agriculture and the plowing, you know, row cropping, whatever is going on there. A lot of that stuff is coming here, and yeah, it can improve our soil, but in the meantime, the Midwest is being decimated in terms of nutrition. So, I mean, there's an awful lot to this. It's going to take a lot of study to really get to the bottom of it. But the other thing, you know, there is an improvement in runoff because of brain is not working, not enough sleep, because of no-till farming. But the no-till farming requires generally a lot of chemical input, a lot of herbicide, and other chemicals burn a lot of the carbon out of the soil, put it into the atmosphere. I mean, this is just a fact of life, and I think you know, this is a complicated issue, as I say. But I think we've got to. I'd like to address this some more at some point, but I think we need to really look at a lot of aspects of this. And James Maroney has done some really good work on this. I don't know how many people wrote his long treatise to the paper, but he certainly presented a heck of a case on the basis of history.
Mark Bobin from Addison again. I grow soybeans and corn. I sell the corn for fuel. The reason I sell corn for fuel is because it's cheaper per million BTU than fuel oil. The other thing is for every ton that I sell, 942 pounds of carbon is sequestered by the stalks that are added back to the soil. This increases the organic matter in the soil. That increases the amount of water that is absorbed and retained by the soil. And when we talk about the RAPs, we have the wrong target. They're pointing at phosphorus. Phosphorus does not move in the lake except through water. And we have a water management problem. By retaining more water on the soil, I have more of a limiting nutrient, water, in August available to grow a new crop. And for every inch of water that is not run off into the ditch or anywhere else, that's less going into the lake. The big problem we have is when we increase the impermeable surfaces, more water runs off, it goes down the streams. So we have to distinguish between runoff and storm surges. And most of the rules that are being put in right now for the RAPs and stuff are counterproductive. The idea is to break up the flows of water and slow them down, and the rules are basically make it almost impossible for a farmer to economically implement those because of the EPA regulations and the state regulations. We have to go back to a science-based system. Thank you.
I know I'm not a legislator, nor am I a farmer here, but I'd just like to make a couple comments. When we talk about farms and inputs, I think we all need to understand that farms are businesses. We are not out there buying a lot of extra anything to dump anywhere. We are not pouring chemicals onto our property. When a farmer uses chemicals, and they're getting away from that because of all the science that has come down, they have to be certified to be able to spread those. Anybody in this room or anybody in Bridport can go to a hardware store and buy a bottle of Roundup and spray it to your heart's content. And that seems to be okay. They show you the ads on the paper where there's 3 dandelions in a row and the squirt just goes, whoa. A farmer would never do that because we can't afford to do that. So I think we have to be very, very careful when we're talking about how it just seems that we're out there buying things, putting things on our farms, pushing things through our cows. The other issue is that when farmers are balancing rations, and I think the term has come up recently and it's been made fun of, precision feeding, that's what we do because we have to do it. We balance our rations. It's like if you or I went on a diet and Weight Watchers said you're not going to eat that this week because it's not doing you any good. When you balance rations, and I know I'm talking to the choir here, but it has to do with the fact that you are taking what it takes to maintain that cow's body weight and ability to live and balancing it against what she needs to make milk with. So we're not pouring things in there. Science has changed. You need to decide which science you're going. You could stand up here and prove anything with science. I could prove the sky is blue or the sky is gray. It doesn't matter. But at some point in time, farmers need to just say, we are businesses, and this is what we do for our bottom lines, because we are not just milk checks, we are people running businesses, and every input that goes in there, thank you very much for the red light, every input that goes in there is counted. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Borlow. I own Mike's Fuels, and I just want to ask legislators if there's any plan in place to help farmers through these trying times with milk prices and coming into the planting season and taking care of their crops. Milk prices are really low right now. Farmers are struggling. There's a lot of new rules, regulations imposed on them with fees and everything else. I was just wondering, is there anyone looking into helping some of these small farms, even some of the large farms, that it is coming to a point where we're shrunk down to like 900 farms for the state of Vermont, and it's shrinking even more. And I was just wondering, is there any plan to help save these farms in the future?
Well, I can speak from the appropriation side of it, having looked at the budgets. If you don't mind, if you're patient with me. It really does take a village. So, is there any help out there for the milk prices? I would have to say that it took everything we had just to keep things at the cap that we are. And we made some strategic investments, or at least not cuts in the ag world. And that would be adding 2 positions to help with the processing, because there's been such a tremendous volume of increase in beef production and other things that requires inspection and things like, in order to keep up with the diversity that's happening, we have to invest in the ag agency in that capacity. Sorry, I'm out of breath from chasing him. But the one thing that when we came down to the last few days of when the House created the budget and sent it over, is we put additional money that we could find that's one-time money to boost up what we have in the working lands investment, because we know that that is a proven economic development tool in Vermont, that any time that we can find any extra money, we try to funnel it into that. There's a base right now of like 594,000 in grants for it, but if we can get that up to, we did over 700,000 And in the past, they can handle well over $1 million. We have people that when they tell me that they're coming, they would move to Vermont. The applicants for coming into Vermont are coming into farming, not all of them, but some of the people using the working lands grants are coming here because they can access that and start up here. And that's a really good thing to see happen. I don't think at this point that we have dollars for the milk pricing piece, because that might be. But I would imagine that I'm going to defer then to the ag and to see what they're working on as a whole group for the state. All right, sorry.
Never does that happen.
I do know that in Senate Agriculture, Senator Bobby Starr has had Joe Bradley in from VITA lately, VITA VAC, and they are looking at trying to find money to lower interest rates. It would only apply to people who have loans through Vermont Ag Credit Corporation. And it is, and I'm saying this to Representative Lanfear, it is $1 million he's looking for. So write us a check. But that is happening this week. He's got people in talking about that. The challenge is we're running out of time because the tradition is the morning committees on the Senate side stop meeting. Is it this week or next week? In 2 weeks. So it'll be next week. So anything they want to do, they have to get done this week, get it voted out of committee. If he's looking for money, it's got to go to appropriations and possibly finance. So it isn't as easy as it sounds. But if you're a person that has loans through the Vermont Ag Credit Corporation, give Senator Starr a call because he's trying to do something on your behalf as far as that goes.
Thank you very much for your response. It's just that I deal with farmers, and right now a lot of them, the beef prices are down. Their cows aren't worth a lot, and they've got a lot of other issues over time with the milk prices being so low for such a long period of time. The milk prices are what they were back in the 70s, and a tractor costs a lot more, as you know, and the fuel back then was 30 cents a gallon. Now it's over $2 a gallon. So I just feel for them, and I know every time they get up and they're working, they know they're losing money, and we're just lucky we got them.
I'm Paul Wagner. I live here in Vermont. I sold my cows in 2006. I'm kind of glad I'm out of that. I can't say much about the economics, but if the young people can't buy from the older retired farmers, then it ends up stopping somewhere. I'm on the Otter Creek Natural Resource District supervisor. We need a couple more supervisors. There are 14 supervisor districts in the state, basically water. And we deal with CREP programs and water quality programs. And years ago, the ag committees, they were at the bottom of the priority list of the 14 standing committees, just about fish and game, which was at the bottom. But now for the water quality, it's floated to the top. And there's a lot of talk about tiling fields and pollution, phosphorus pollution. Harvey went over to Meyer Institute. They had in December. Harvey was over there. There was about 28 people. They had a 2-year experiment with checking soluble phosphorus that ends up in the water supply. And they had one field that was tiled and surface runoff, measuring the phosphorus. And they had another field, they had just surface runoff. And the soluble phosphorus in the tile fields was 70% less than the water phosphorus that came off just the surface water of the other fields. That was just a 2-year experiment. And now they're taking water samples from the tiling in Vermont. They're starting to take them this year. It'll probably be 5 years before you get a accurate average of the phosphorus. But when the water flows through the soil, soil particles attach, especially clay, hold the phosphorus in the soil, so you can reduce soil erosion and you reduce phosphorus in the lake. So that's just part of the information I've gotten. Also, we have tours. We had one last fall, and the year before we have these tours, and especially like the legislators to go to these tours to see what's going on, foot's on the ground to see what's happening, what they're doing to reduce soil erosion on the croplands and in the forest land also. So, you know, the bus is $1,100 to rent that bus, but we have like 38 people, but I think the legislators and the ag committees and the natural resource committees, that bus should be full of those people. So at the end of the day, they can see what's going on out there instead of just listening to somebody talk about it. So that's my comments.
I'm sorry to be so wordy here, but, you know, I spent a number of years hacking around Europe on a bicycle, hitchhiking, motorcycle, whatever. I learned a lot, and one of the major things I learned is that Americans are very ignorant about what goes on in the rest of the world. The Scandinavian countries have a very steeply progressive income tax. They take care of their farmers. They subsidize their farmers. They make factory wages. We used to have a 90% tax on the wealthiest. Now, I know that's pretty rough on the billionaires. Somebody bringing in $1 billion a year only has $100 million to live off of. I really feel sorry for them, you know. If we were to take some of the money out of the pockets of the rich who are not paying their fair percentage by any means, it's we poor people who are paying the biggest share of our income, and help the farmers out and create a program to cut production. And one of the best ways of cutting production is cutting the grain input. Like I said, I think this is really counterproductive. And if we cut the grain input, the milk production would drop. As we have it now, every time times are rough, the farmers put on more cows so they can hopefully make more money, and this is sinking everybody. Even the organic prices have dropped because Organic Valley, in their ultimate wisdom, took on a whole bunch of huge farms out on the West Coast who aren't organic at all. They meet USDA standards, which are bogus, but they never should have done this. But they're sinking it for everybody but the grass-fed people. And the grass-fed farmer, the local grass-fed farmer has not been affected. He still gets the same amount of money. But we can address this if we have the money.
Yeah, just a correction. We have a grass farm organic milk producer on the Agriculture Committee. And Friday we were talking about how the milk prices were affecting him. And in two ways. One is the price that they're being paid has been reduced, and also the volume of milk they can produce is being produced. So it's affecting every dairy producer no matter where you are.
Not according to this guy.
Well, I'm just talking to a guy that gets his milk check from grass-fed certified organic milk production, and he's telling me what's happening to him. So I don't know how I can argue with it.
How recently?
Friday.
Okay, maybe they've dropped since I talked to this other guy.
Okay.
They've been dropping for a while because he told his story 2 weeks ago also.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they've been seeing some declines in the volume of milk they can ship and also what they're getting paid for that milk for some time now. It's just the latest one has just been the last couple of weeks.
So I'm Heidi Willis from Salisbury, not a farmer, but interested in the farm community because I want it to live. So I'll just follow up, Joe, on a little bit on what you said. It seems to me the unspoken elephant in this room is that we have an economic structure that does not give us what we want in our communities. So right now that economic structure is, it doesn't care about things unless we place those values on it. So back in the 1920s and 30s, it didn't care about child labor. Kids worked, and they worked 10 or 12 hours a day, until we put in laws that said kids can't work. And it didn't care about worker health. So people might have gotten
in their sausage, they might have gotten some workers in the sausage, because the conditions for workers were not, that didn't care about, the structure itself didn't care about worker safety in the environment. Until we said, oh, that's important. You know, people should be able to work in a safe environment. And you can kind of go on, but we haven't yet gotten to the point where we say the environment is important, and there should be some basic rules about how we are working and farming on the environment. And that we should build then our farming practices on those rules. And you can include in that community. The economic structure doesn't care about community. If we care about community, which I do, I want to see farms survive and live. I think they're important to our community. I think they're important to the landscape. But we need to start first with how the natural world works and what those rules are. And then we need to build an economic structure that supports those rules. And we need to build economic practices that will support workable farms, workable, be they vegetable or dairy farms, that will then support workable communities on our landscape, which is what, as Joe mentioned, they have done in the Nordic countries. So they have taken and designed their economic structure around their community values, around their common values. They don't have an economic structure that just runs wild, and hopefully you get to keep up, but if you don't, you're lost, which is, I'm afraid, what's happening to our farms right now, and it breaks my heart. It's a huge discussion because we are really married to our economic structure in this country, but we're pretty miserable in a lot of places because of that structure, and you got to start the conversation somewhere. So why not here?
John Ball from Addison. You know, I'm not a farmer. I spent a lot of time over my life on farms, working on farms. I'm a gardener. I ran across something, about 8 years ago, I think it was, that I went to a workshop and learned about it, went home and started doing it, practicing it. And a lot of you in here who have heard me speak before have heard me speak of this. It's biochar. And why do I bring it up again right now? If we want to work with nature, as nature works, we've got to understand that the fertility of our soil is really based on nature and what nature has been doing in the soils for millions of years. The mycelium, the roots of plants, the nematodes, the microscopic critters that live in the soil and all work together create the fertility of the soil. They don't survive if we spray Roundup on them or even chemicals that improve the fertility, so-called fertility of the soil. We put nitrogen on next to the corn, and that corn grows wonderful that year. And the nitrogen's gone, the soil is gone. I would hope, I'm going to talk to you directly, Marie. I would hope that, I agree with Joe. What I know of the Adets and their farming practices are heads and shoulders above a lot of the other farmers in the community. But I think someone like your farm, if they really looked at this, at biochar, and understood the importance of it to feeding the soil and the critters in the soil that are creating a fertility for you, you wouldn't have to buy these expensive chemicals again and kill all these things. Add to that a little bit of the mineralization that's required in the soil that's depleted every time we grow a crop on it and we take the crop out, we're taking some of the minerals out of the soil. Why not add your biochar to some mineralization, rock dust. I see Tom Vanacore in here today. Now, I'm not just speaking theoretically from a workshop I went to 8 years ago. I'm talking about personal gardening experience that I have, that anybody that wants to come to our place and see what this does, it's remarkable. Thank you.
I think you'll be pleased to know that one of my long conversations this morning was especially about biochar. As a matter of fact, we want to have nutrients infused into our biochar from the solids that come out of the manure, so we can keep recycling.
Yes, I'd like to respond to that as well. The Agriculture Committee has been taking testimony on this same subject for a couple of years now, and it's kind of interesting. I'm going to fall back to the no-till symposium that they did in March, put on by UVM Extension and the industry folks, and their main focus was focused on soil health and what that soil health is. And I have two documents here. One is Carbon Sequestration Potential in Agricultural Soils by Daniel Kane at Middlebury College, and he talks about soil health. And then this green cover crop seed. And you know, they talk about the fundamentals in soil health, and you know, we don't have time enough to go into the details, but keep the soil covered. That's what Marie was talking about with no-till and what they're doing on their farm, is keeping the soil covered at all times, to keep the soil where it is. Minimize soil disturbance. That was another main topic in the whole discussion. And then plant diversity. When we talk about planting a crop, even when you use no-till, and yes, you're going to have to somehow kill the vegetation that's there, or at least burn it back enough so that you can get a new crop established, like a corn crop. So, but once that's done, reseed it down to a cover crop. So now we can put on a cover crop you know, when the corn is knee-high, or we can do it anytime throughout the growing season mostly, and we can also do it after the corn has been harvested. But the goal is to keep that ground covered all the time. And then the other part, which is really critical to what you were talking about, is keeping living roots in the ground. And that's the secret to the whole thing, is keeping those living roots in the ground to make it happen. And then the other part is to have a mix of animal agriculture. And so, you know, we're fortunate here in the Northeast that we do have cows, whether they're out to pasture or whether we take the manure out and spread it at agronomic levels in the field. So we're trying to accomplish that. We're trying to duplicate what's happening in nature. And, you know, when we've had quite a lot of discussion over organic matter. And if you start looking at your organic matter on your soil sample, and every farm has to have a nutrient management plan, and one of the benefits for that is to see what the organic matter is in the soil. And over just a few short years, we're seeing that organic matter building up. So there's some carbon sequestration that's taken place over time, and if we do it long enough, we're going to see a substantial change there. And as I said at one of the last former legislative breakfasts we had, I'm figured out how to pay the farmers for sequestering that carbon, you know, for the state, and they're doing it. So get back to Heidi's comment about having some kind of economy around this movement is really essential. And I think, Heidi, you're right on when you say we need to have a discussion about how we're going to accomplish this, because I think it all fits together. So, but I'm really quite pleased and very proud of the farmers in Addison. How many members of the Farmer Coalition that are part of this discussion in Addison County?
How many of us are there?
Yeah, in your group.
In a couple of hundred.
Yeah, so we've got a couple hundred farmers that are going to meetings on a regular basis that are really getting themselves up to speed on this whole movement, because they see it as a benefit to them, not only a benefit for water quality, but if we build up this soil organic matter, we're also going to lessen the amount of resources we need to bring in, nutrients that we need to bring in on the farm, because we're creating it, we're retaining it there. So I mean, there's a lot of benefits to the discussion and the efforts that are going on today.
Mark Bowman again, to address the issue that Mr. Ball raised. In the Midwest, they're doing studies with using biochar mixed with sugar as a starter. The idea being is the sugar kickstarts the bacteria and the other fungi and everything else in the soil while the soil is cold, and gets them going to make the nutrients available to the plants. And the biochar is added because it's basically a home for the bacteria. The question I would like to ask is, how many people here believe that everybody has a right to eat? Would you show me your hands? Because there's people going around saying everybody has a right to eat. And my response to that is, who has the duty to produce it? And if somebody has a right to something that somebody else produces, is a word for it. It's called slavery. Now, to what Ms. Willis referred to about the economics, 61% of the value of the dollar is determined by the world stocks of corn. That's it. And I had a teacher, Marina Eduardovna Arnsberger, who lived through the siege of Leningrad. And she said then that that you could buy an ounce of meat for an ounce of gold until there was no meat available, and nobody wanted gold because it was too heavy to carry. So the fact is as farmers, we put value into the currency, and when we put a lot of value in there, the banks print more and the banks make money. So that's the part, I just want to raise that for you to think about, that's how our economy is screwed up. And if you have a system where it's dependent on how cheap the food is, and the limiting factor is how many you drive out so you don't have too much, sooner or later, statistically, you're going to have a problem when the whole system collapses. Is that the direction we want to head? Maybe we should start thinking about where we're going.
My name's Tom Vanacore. I thought I'd just jump in here for a second. I can't cover half the topics here, and I don't want to. One of the things that you said, which is interesting about the farmer, or paying the farmer to do all the work for sequestering or capturing carbon or any of these things that everyone claims is needed. It's an interesting discussion that probably should be had seriously, because we're talking about spending $20 million a year for the next 30 years for a phosphorus problem that may or may not be measurable, or may not be quantifiable. But it is true that building soil carbon is a positive thing. It is true that building soil organic matter is necessary for good farming if you're going to be growing on dirt. Not everybody, or soil, not everybody grows in soil. Some people grow in solution in greenhouses, but here in the valley, we're in a good position because we probably will have more or less a stable climate. We're going to have extremes, but I agree with Marie to say that this is a breadbasket. This has traditionally been the breadbasket for the Northeast, and we do business, my company does business all over the country in agriculture, and has been for 25 years. And we see it all over, we see what's going on. And I can tell you right now that in the margins, the temperate zones are extremely unstable. And if you think that global warming or climate change isn't real, you need to take a pill and wake up, because it's a definite thing. And whether that's going to be warming or chilling or whatever, it's going to be unstable. And so this question about, what can the farmers do? What can the foresters do? What can the land managers do? The answer is they can do everything. And they should be paid to do those things. And farm diversity is a key to success. We see this all over the country right now. If you're having problems with milk, but you know how to grow, if you can diversify, you may find a way forward in a lane. And the legislators could help with that. And so I guess that's all I can tell you right now. I'll be around if anybody wants to talk later. Thank you.
So here's where we're going to end for today, because it just looks like it's going to keep going. I just want to thank you all for coming. And it was, oh, I had water off. Oh, I thought it was, all right. Anybody else have any other questions? I just want to bring one thing up that I heard at one of our Farm Bureau conventions, that every cow brings $20,000 into the economy. I don't know if that's changed, but that...
The dairy industry is worth $2 billion to this state. So I don't know how you'd ever replace it.
And do we want to get Vermont to a position where we don't have the farms dotting the community and the land? One of the things that we're finding in the Farm Bureau area is we give out scholarships. And we sometimes have a hard time. Lately we've done okay, but there aren't a lot of people, a lot of kids that are going into agriculture. And the thing is, why would you want to do it when the price of milk is so low? And you take up this big debt and the price of milk is low. And so, you know, for people who want to have their farm continue, there aren't young people, you know, knocking on the door saying, we want to do dairy farming. And that's something we have to keep in mind in the state of Vermont. So, does anybody have any other questions they want to, or any other comments?
Bill Keys at Bridport, and this is one, I think this is one of the most interesting meetings I've been to, and I've been to many of them over the years. My wife and I have been Grangers for 50 years, we're part of this, and it's certainly wonderful, but you know, farming today, I gave up farming in '76. And to hear what they go through today scares me. I was thinking this morning, you know, well, since I came dinner here, maybe I'll start looking for a farm this week. I haven't mentioned it to my wife, she's in the kitchen yet. But you know, not a darn one of you has said anything that has encouraged me to go back to farming. But we do thank you all for coming. I enjoy these meetings. I haven't been as active as I used to be. I'll be 89 in a couple months. I think I'll pass. I'm going back to farming.
The next meeting is it's going to be April 16th at the Congregational Church in Weybridge. So that's where it's going to be. It's going to be a breakfast, right? It doesn't say. It'll be breakfast. Apple pie. Oh, yes. Okay. And I just want to encourage people, you know, the Farm Bureau does do a lot of things. You know, we give out scholarships and we're providing these breakfasts and discussions. Please try to join the Farm Bureau. Your Farm Bureau puts on a farmer appreciation dinner, which is coming up. What other organization does that? Come for free, just bring a dessert, and bring food for the food shelf. You do it? Okay. So, thank you all for coming. Remember the donation box at the end if you haven't already donated. Thank you for coming.